Hi, John. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for doing this.
Of course.
Cool. So I'll get right to it. How have you been handling life during a pandemic?
It's just been a bunch of peaches and cream. Just no,
You've been making pies. You have the Me TV on.
so many pies. Wow, I'm just putting them on my windowsill. uh, it's been a challenge. I'll be frank, but I mean, I have to always remind myself that I'm in a privileged position where I have a job. I still have health insurance. I have a roof over my head. I have food on the table. So I try to keep that always at the forefront of my mind, especially like as I watch the news, as I listen to different stories from colleagues and other people that I know. Just people that have to go to food banks to get their food for the day, or people that aren't sure where their next paycheck is coming from in this time. So to say I'm doing all right is definitely a blessing,
Mhm.
and so I'm just trying to make the most of the time,
Mhm.
whether to be with family, whether to connect with my students, or just kind of find time for myself again,
Yeah,
to acknowledge that this is all going to be over soon, and hopefully we'll make it to the other side.
yeah, that's wonderful. You say students. You're a teacher. What do you teach and for what grade?
Yeah, so I'm a high school Spanish and Heritage Spanish teacher in Zion. I teach freshmen and sophomores. And I mentioned the Heritage Spanish thing just because people don't really know what that is. It's basically Spanish for students that speak Spanish or have already some knowledge of Spanish beyond, your basics like colors and numbers and stuff.
That's awesome. And walk me through this. So when this virus first happened, were you talking to the students about it first, or were they asking questions to you about it?
So in my classes, we do like this like news segment, and it came on in the news I think in January, February. So I put it on, and I'm like, all right, we're going to talk about coronavirus. This is happening. At the time, it was happening, thousands of miles away from us.
Hmm.
So I'm like, oh, we just got to, be smart and wash our hands and be safe, but just to acknowledge that this is happening.
Hmm.
And I try to not talk about it too much because, in my ignorance, I didn't think it would actually come to us.
Yeah.
And then in March, people kept talking about it. My students kept talking about it. They're like, "Oh, did you hear? It's in another country closer to us. So it's over here now." And suddenly it became here in the U.S. So it got a lot more real. Um, and I try to just to continue to remind them like, "Hey, you just gotta continue to be safe. Take care of those that are around you, and not to, I guess, over exaggerate any hysteria that's going on. You know, you don't want to, say that, oh, it originated in China, so it's only with Chinese students. Well, no, that's not the case at all.
Hmm.
It doesn't discriminate, and you just have to do what's best for your safety, for your health, and to not be taking it lightly.
Yeah. And I like what you said that because as someone who was still going to school at the time, I had a professor in particular who we talk about life, and he's like, "Did
Hmm.
you hear about this coronavirus? What is that? Just wash your hands. Don't take it seriously." And and
Uh-huh.
and the whole time I took it, I looked up to him and thought, "Yeah, he's probably right. This is probably nothing." And
Right.
then a couple weeks later, and we had our last class saying, "Well, guys, I was wrong."
Yep.
Yep, I'm like, well,
100%.
thanks for that. Did you follow your own advice? Because I always wonder with the teacher, when they give advice to students, do they follow their own advice, or is it just on the spot, you think?
I try to take the same medicine that I give my students, to not be a hypocrite, to be honest. And at home, I would tell my brothers, like, please watch the news, please be informed. This isn't just some made up thing.
Mhm.
Talking to my parents about it too, just like, my dad's a truck driver, so just giving him some hand sanitizer and telling him, like, please use this, like, wipe down your trucks, make sure you're just being safe as much as possible, because this is something that, like I said before, doesn't discriminate, and you don't really know if it's on a surface you're touching, if someone else has been exposed to it. So it's just best to proceed in the utmost caution.
And then going to this transition, you guys are doing e-learning, correct?
Yes.
So what was that transition like for you?
So so at our school, we do a lot with technology. Everyone's got, like many schools in the U.S.
Mhm.
We're 1-to-1. Every student has a Chromebook. Most of our assignments have some component that involves technology. whether it's a YouTube video or a document on Google.
Mm.
So we were familiar-ish with how to operate digitally,
Mm.
but I think once school got canceled for sure, and it was 100% online, I think for a lot of teachers, and myself included, it was definitely a mentality switch. Like, how do you have all of these classroom norms in now a fully digital space,
Yeah.
right? Like, I was trained to be an in-person teacher, not necessarily to be an online professor, to put it that way.
Mm.
So it's definitely just like, okay, what can I provide students in a way that mimics some of the routines and classroom norms that we had in class in person, and bring them into a digital space? So for my classes, we did daily reading, so I just had them do a digital log instead of a physical log, and kind of giving them as many outlets as possible to find readings for that activity.
Mm.
But then you have to acknowledge that not all students have the same level of access to the internet,
Right.
and that's something that I continue to learn and to realize about my students, but also about students in the rest of our state and nation. Um, so I have a few students that don't have internet access at home, so you have to think about, okay, not only are you adapting for e-learning for most of your students, but now you have to take all of your lessons and what you wanted to do and adapt them without the internet and without your presence there. So it's definitely a challenge, and I tell myself, you have to give yourself grace. You're doing the best thing that you can. Like, it's not going to work 100% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
but I think if you're giving 100% of the effort, that's all that you can really ask of yourself.
Yeah. And I think the word to best describe a teacher is adaptable, and they're willing to work in different circumstances. And I think for every teacher right now, they kind of have to be adaptable. How long was the timeline for you to have an idea of how to do online learning?
So our last official day of school was March 13th. That was a Friday. Um, and the week after that would have been the week before spring break. So our district gave us that week. We want to provide learning opportunities, which is different from e-learning in the sense that we're giving you mini lessons. We're not necessarily grading them, but it's an opportunity for you to kind of expand your subject matter knowledge of what's going on in that class. The week after that for us was spring break, and then the following was e-learning 100%. So we technically had about 2 weeks to prepare for e-learning. For us and here in the state, like, it was pushed until March 30th, and then it was April, the middle of April, then it ended up being the end of April, and now it's actually the rest of the school year. So I think everyone has been adapting in little chunks, right? We're planning for 2 weeks, and we're planning for 3 weeks, and 5, and actually we're planning for the rest of the year. So it kind of threw a wrench in how you plan lessons and how you develop a unit, because you didn't know how long this was actually going to last.
Mhm. What was harder for you? Was it thinking about the work or thinking about the students during that time?
Definitely the students, 100%. I mean, I know I can, speaking for myself, I know I can provide a lesson that kind of gets at the essence of what I would have done in class. But I think about some of my students on that Friday who, after the announcement had been said that we're not coming back, at least for the next week or whatever, that they're like, oh, I don't want to, be at home. I'd rather be at school with all my friends, or like, I'd rather be in this class. I had one student who came up to me in near tears and said, like, I would much rather be here than be at home. And like, as a person, not even as a teacher, like, your heart feels for those students, because you don't always know what's going on at home. You don't always know what's going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we aren't coming back for the rest of the school year, I can't even begin to imagine what they must be feeling. My freshmen who had this year as an introduction to high school,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they're thinking. If they're planning on coming back for sophomore year, what must be going through their heads of, is this what I signed up to do? Is this how learning is going to be for the near future? It's just a lot of emotions to kind of process. And I'm sure teachers all over are kind of going through the same thing of, how do you take care of all your students when you cannot be near them? And you can only see some of them through Zoom or through other mediums, and some that you actually probably won't see until the next year.
Mm-hmm. And I like you said, I bet it's really emotional for you, to think about that. Is it hard to as well to think about your own sanity while also caring for dozens of other students that you look after?
Yeah, I'm definitely, and I fully admit this, I'm definitely not someone who puts my self care first.
Yo, for sure,
Um,
that's great.
so this has definitely been like the silver lining of this all is that I now have time for myself.
Hmm.
Um, I'm used to kind of juggling a lot of different hats, so this is kind of just like multiplied to the nth degree. Um, but I'm thankful that like we live in a technological space now where like there's FaceTime, there's Zoom, there's texting. There are so many ways to get connected with people that even though we are distant, in the physical space, we aren't distant from still connecting from our loved ones, from our friends, from our students, and that it's definitely helped me kind of keep myself grounded in just take one day at a time. You're going to get through this. We're all going to get through this as long as we're looking out for each other and kind of being a helper wherever you can.
Yeah, and I think for myself, like when I first was going through this pandemic, I like to describe myself as a cranky old man when it comes to technology, not knowing what the hell is a Zoom. That sounds like some like on Zoom when I first heard about it, it sounded like some Australian name from like a boomerang or something. So I was like, "What do you mean we're gonna talk with each other on a laptop?" And now,
Right, right.
and then like every week, I am getting used to it.
uh-huh.
Were you a big techie during class?
Sort of. Definitely not as much as like some other young teachers that I know who are embedding so many videos and GIFs into the lessons. I'm like lucky if I include a cool picture and a transition. Um, like you, I had no idea what Zoom was before this. Like I definitely saw it on my Chromebook. Never thought about using it before. It just sort of seemed like it came out of the blue, to be honest.
Yeah.
But then like everyone's using it. Like famous people are using it. Jimmy Fallon and all the Jimmys are using it. So I'm like, okay, I guess this is something that we do now. And then I guess I just was behind on the Zoom train, I guess.
And to think the Zoom people are probably making more money than anyone is right now during this pandemic. So,
Yeah.
so
Don't
the,
even get me started.
yeah.
At
Oh,
least Zoom is free. Thank
yeah.
you, Zoom Press.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Oh, that's awesome. Is it easy for you to look from the side of the students? Because I'm always curious from a teacher side, do you always feel like they want to do the work or they feel like they have to do the work because it's a grade?
Yeah, that's really it touches at like a bigger question of how you think about teaching in general and like what is the purpose of a grade. Um, for me personally, I see even like I'm definitely culpable of this. Like I've had assignments where I just felt like, oh yeah, I want you to do this because you need the grade, right?
Mhm.
And you really want to go towards the essence of I want you to do this because you actually feel like it's going to benefit you as a person,
Mhm.
not necessarily as a Spanish student, as a math student, as a science student. And that's kind of like the direction where I would like to go there. I'm not saying I'm there yet.
Mhm.
Um, and I would prefer that students don't really think about the grade that they're eventually going to receive, but think about like the process of getting to that end point and thinking about, okay, what is the growth that I've had from September to December and from September all the way to June or May.
Mhm.
I think now with e-learning, that essence is easier to see because we've been told, you don't want to assign a grade that will be detrimental to the student's mental health or well-being because of these unprecedented circumstances. So I think that kind of allows for more flexibility of like, I really want you to do these activities, these projects, these units, because I know and I hope that they benefit you as a person in this moment, but also moving forward.
Yeah. And whenever this will be over, hopefully soon,
Mm-hmm.
is it going to be a weird transition going back into a classroom?
100%. 100%. I mean, I did not think even for a second that we would come back this year, which was in itself a difficult pill to swallow.
Mhm.
Um, I hope and knock on wood and praying and all that stuff that we come back before the start of the school year.
Mhm.
As a high school teacher specifically, I cannot imagine establishing classroom norms, getting to know 13, 14, 15-year-old students in August when they have not seen me, they have not interacted with me in person. I'm a pretty quirky person, period, and a quirky teacher. So like I feel like they need to know that before they start seeing some of the lessons I provide or like the videos that I put on our learning management system. So I'm hoping that I can just come back and do all that in person, right?
Yeah.
Even all the way down to a preschool teacher, to a kindergarten teacher. Like, how do you connect with students on an emotional level when like you can't be in the same space as them, right? And maybe that's just me because like I can't fathom how that works because I haven't been trained in like that kind of teaching.
Yeah.
I would love to have a perspective of like an online professor and saying like, how do you do all those things and still feel like you had an emotional connection with like each and every one of your students, right? So we'll see. It will definitely be hard regardless of when we come back.
Yeah.
I've told some of my students it will be emotional. Like when we see each other in the hallway, I'm sure you will want to hug your friends. You might feel like crying. You might feel like, whoa, like I didn't think we'd actually be back this soon, or like have things changed or whatnot. Is that just like more dust in a corner where I thought there was less dust?
And I think the environment itself is just going to be very weird in a classroom. Like right now, if the classes I have, I can't remember anyone's names or give a crud about who they are.
Yeah.
Because like the environment is just gone. Because before we had this good, working, loving environment of we love what we're doing, and now we meet for 30 minutes on a Wednesday morning, and I'll see them next week. And so
Right.
I'm hoping whenever I teach or whenever I'm done, just being back in the classroom is going to feel so good again. Just to
Yep.
see not just a teacher, but every other student in that class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%, 100%. I told my students, like, the first week was okay, like, because it was before spring break, so it like felt like a longer break. The third week, I'm like, okay, this is fine. Fourth week, I'm like, all right, are we going back yet? Now I'm like, I just want to be in the building again.
Yeah.
Like people think, oh, this is a vacation for teachers. Like it's definitely still stressful, just like now at home. And like your family has to see it. And they're like, why are you in your room all day? Like, I promise you I am doing work. It's just on the computer.
I swear, I do shower.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh, John, we met in high school many moons ago, and
Yes, so many moons.
I will say what the high school is doing, I think is really cool. They did a mascot video, and
Yeah.
they did teachers lip syncing the pop songs to let them know
Yep.
we're here for you and we're just like you and we're going through this every day. In your opinion, what have you seen from teachers that I think is just so cool to watch?
I've seen many videos of teachers kind of doing the same thing of like holding up a sign and then all the teachers of the school like say, oh, we miss you and we care about you and all those things. And we did that too at my school. I've seen videos of teachers who like literally have driven up to a student's home with like a whiteboard in front of their house and like started teaching.
Wow.
Or I've seen other teachers that have like sent personalized letters with something as simple as like a sticker in them and sending that to each and every student and like seeing their reactions of like, oh my god, my teacher remembered to write me something or like actually gave me something. In my case, like I sent my students some books home for our next unit, and to get some emails that say like, thank you so much for the book, or like it was so nice to like get this in the mail. Something as simple as like a thank you from a student, like at least in my mind, like hopefully like they like felt some kind of way about getting that and maybe thinking about school and thinking about the good times that we had in the classroom. It's just a way to like remind your students and your colleagues too. They just like, we miss what we don't have right now. But that doesn't mean we're not thinking about those times. That doesn't mean we're not thinking about those people and the experiences that we had together. We just want to continue to have them, hopefully sooner rather than later.
And like today, I was at work, and someone that I think you might know, I'll tell you after the recording. She teaches in Milwaukee, but it's her student's birthday, I think tomorrow. And so she bought a poster board and some birthday candles and streamers, and she was going to drive to their house and wish them a happy birthday. And I thought, oh, that is so cool that teachers are willing to go the extra mile to let their students know that they're there. And in some ways, and I think we get to kind of learn more about teachers and individual teachers of how far they're willing to go for their students and more than themselves, which I think is awesome.
100%, 100% agree. I think we're seeing a lot of like love and care and emotion that teachers have for not only the profession, but like literally the human beings that they interact with each and every day. And that it isn't just about the grade, it isn't just about the subject matter, it's about helping these students become full-fledged human beings and adults and thinkers and lovers, and just hoping that they learn a little bit from us.
Yeah. Well, John, if I had to give you a grade, because I am a grader. No, I'm not. Um, I, I can't thank you enough for being my first guest on the Week of Educators, and you really did kick off a great, fascinating look at teaching. So I thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on and for giving me the time to talk a little bit.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to this episode of You Have a Minute, a daily isolated podcast. This is the first episode of 7 episodes focusing on educators, and no better way to start a week off than with Jon Reinoso. Like I said, he is a Spanish teacher in Zion, and what it sounded like he was doing was great work. And he's a nice guy to talk to and get a great insight on. So thanks to him for coming on the show. Tomorrow, we're going to have Will Petway, and you'll know more about them tomorrow. Yeah, thanks for listening. Stay safe, wear a mask, isolate yourself. Let's flatten this curve, baby. And I'll see you tomorrow.